In a world of AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude, and social media algorithms, a lot of us, especially watching Tech 360, don't end up reading too many books. And so it's a testament to the fact that this is an absolutely exemplary piece of literature in my hand on the future of species, authoring life by means of artificial biological intelligence. And I'm joined by a very special guest here on Tech 360 and on NDTV, the author of this book, Adrian Wolfson. What a pleasure to have you on the show, Adrian.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be on the show today.
Adrian, in a world of AI, we think we can break everything down by just using something like a ChatGPT, but some of the terms here used in this book, and I have enjoyed going through this book, so thank you and congratulations on such a massive launch in London. The words in the book that you've used, some of the terms that you've coined, art evolution, the manifesto of life, spaghetti code, genomes as spaghetti code, it's fascinating. But these all tie down to a larger theme on artificial biological intelligence being the North Star. Could you break it down for us, and especially for those who will soon be going and purchasing this book, what can they expect, Adrian?
Yes, thank you, Ayush. For the last 4 billion years, all life on Earth has evolved by a process of evolution by natural selection. And that's a process that lacks any foresight or intelligence or specific design, and there's no knowledge of the future. For the first time in the history of mankind and the history of life on Earth, all of a sudden, there's a second author. There's a new show in town. And the new show in town is the result of a collaboration between natural and artificial intelligence that enables life to be authored, much in the same way as you would author a book. And this obviously is a dramatic moment in life's history, because suddenly we can build and design life according to our own intentions. And the reason I wrote this book is I wanted the public to be aware of this phenomenal moment in history. I wanted to call the moment, and I wanted the public to be able to participate in the broader debate around what we should and shouldn't do, and to help create those guardrails which we'll need to align on as a civilization, as a global civilization, and to ensure that we go about synthesizing new life and designing new life in a manner that is wise, safe, ethical, responsible, equitable, and that benefits society in the broadest possible sense. So I see my book as a kind of guidebook. When I was a kid, just before I went to medical school, my dad said, "Hey, Adrian, just go enjoy yourself for a year, go and see the world." And that's what I did. I actually traveled around the south of India as part of that trip. And I had this trusty Lonely Planet guide. And when I landed in the place, I opened it up and I said, "Oh, where should I stay? What should I see? What are the local customs? How much should I be paying for dinner? Where should I eat?" And my book, and this is the hardback version, the English version here, I see that as a kind of guide, like a Lonely Planet guide, a trusted friend, a companion that you can carry in your jacket pocket as you traverse a different type of landscape. And the landscape that you, the reader, will be traversing is not a geographical location. It's actually the landscape of the future of life. And this is the guidebook that can help you navigate that extraordinary new landscape in a safe and wise manner.
That's fascinating, and the concept of art evolution, I think a term that you've coined very, very aptly over here when you're talking about a machine-inspired process, Adrian, where humans and AI can design these unique species from scratch. Can you tell us a little bit more about art evolution? Is this the way forward? Because I'm guessing a lot of the AI companies and a lot of the scientific research companies, even in the US, would be watching with bated breath for a concept like this to actually come to fruition.
Yes, and it wouldn't surprise you, I guess, to know that I'm having conversations with some of those guys as we speak. The term artivolution was one that I coined myself, simply because I felt the necessity to come up with a new phrase that kind of captures this new mode of creating life. So evolution is a natural engineer, if you like, which produces new life by a process of evolution by natural selection. It generates things, and then those things are tested, and then they either survive or they don't survive. Art evolution complements that, but is fundamentally different in that in evolution, you always have to reference history, i.e. what's come before, and everything that exists is a kind of the result of a tinkering, if you like, with pre-existing structures. With art evolution, you're pretty much starting with a blank slate. It's like you're an author, I give you a typewriter, I give you a piece of paper, and I say, hey, Ayush, write your own story, dude. I mean, you don't need to write everybody else's story or rewrite Shakespeare or rewrite, whatever piece of literature you happen to like. Just write your own story from scratch. And that's what generative biology, which is another name for this synthetic biology revolution. And I quite like the phrase generative biology because it kind of encapsulates the whole activity. Generative biology enables you to come up with a design and then build it. And that builds a new living thing. And we can come on to why you might want to do that in a second, right? Mm-hmm. But art evolution just simply describes the fact that there will be new types of life that do not reference history and that are in existence purely because AI in conjunction with the human conceived of this new type of biological entity and then basically pressed the print button on the equivalent of a laser printer that can print out genomes and brought it into life.
Everyone's talking about biohacking nowadays, Adrian, and longevity and ensuring that people live well past 100, maybe set up a civilization on Mars for whatever it's worth. But you've also mentioned something very interesting, which largely points to the end of extinction. Right? Through a process in the book, you do talk about how using genome synthesis, we could probably bring back extinct human species, maybe Neanderthals or the mammoth. Is this more theoretical, or do you think this is something that can be worked on and genuinely probably really help human civilization on the whole?
Yeah, I actually think the problem is relatively trivial, to be really honest with you, Ayush, as remarkable as that might sound, right? And what you've got to realize is that all existing and past life on Earth, which includes all extinct forms of life, represent just the tiniest fraction of possible life, right? And possible life exists in a kind of huge kind of library of it's a combinatorial library which contains every possible combination of the 4 chemicals that DNA is made of. The writer Borges, the Argentinian poet, imagined a library which we now refer to as a Borgian library, which was the library of all possible books. You can imagine if you've got some scribes to just write out every combination of letters in the English alphabet, you'd have the library of all possible books, which would be infinite. Imagine now a library of all possible species. I mean, just think about that, right? And think that the species we're aware of or that once existed are just a tiny fraction of those. So within that library, yes, the Neanderthals genomes and Neanderthals are extinct, but the sequence of their genome is still there. It will always be there. It has a timeless mathematical existence. Similarly, you've got the genomes of hobbit men and Denisovans, Homo erectus, and all the prior species of humans. But what you also have in that library are the genome sequences of all the different types of human species that have never actually been realized by history, and those far exceed the ones that exist today. But if you are asking me, could we bring back a Neanderthal? The answer is yes. And the technology, some of which I myself within my company Generative have helped to develop, and one of which we published a couple of weeks ago, is basically helping us to industrialize the process of printing out genomes in the same way that a laser printer helped us to industrialize the process of printing out documents rather than having to type them out. It's more convenient, it's faster, it's cheaper. And the method we've developed really goes quite far down that line to enable you to press the button and print out a genome. And it really gives you freedom to kind of roam around that huge space of biological possibility.
You also speak of a second genesis in the book, and when we look at all of these themes that you're mentioning, Adrian, for the average person or the average Joe who's concerned about where AI is leading us and what's the way forward for the world, what does this mean for healthcare, for instance, or access to some of these technologies? Would this sort of democratize and decentralize the process?
Yeah, interesting question, Ayush. And very quickly, just to quickly go back to AI, what AI does is it can help us unpick the grammar of life. In the same way that mathematics turned out to be the perfect language to describe the motion of planets and to send humans to the moon and so on, AI is enabling us to understand the generative grammar of life. And when we understand that, we'll be able to understand how humans work. We don't have an instruction manual for how we work. Sadly, evolution didn't provide that, right? But with AI, we can begin to reverse engineer the missing instruction manual and use that to help us understand why we get ill, why we don't live longer than we do, and what we might need to change to get rid of all human illness and to make us live longer and more healthily. But that same knowledge of the grammar of life can also enable us to use biology as a technology. It's a programmable language. So, for example, we can store information in DNA. We can make bioenergy using biological energy creating systems. We can use synthetic biology to re-engineer and reprogram the genomes of crops to make them drought resistant and heat resistant and to increase the yield. We can use biological materials like spider silk, which have the tensile strength of steel, and incorporate them into all of the things around us. In 10, 15 years, we might make our cell phones using biological components. We may grow houses. And the beautiful thing about biology is it's a sustainable technology which doesn't destroy the earth. And which can be used with relative ease. And I actually think about biology as being the new steel in a way. In the 19th century, Bessemer reduced the cost of steel production by tenfold, and he enabled Carnegie to turn it into a technology with geopolitical consequences, building railways and skyscrapers and bridges and creating the infrastructure of the world. And I think biology is now set to become the new infrastructure, and there's a new biological revolution which will be the gateway to a multi-trillion-dollar economy right on the horizon. And it relies on the ability to master this convergence between AI-driven genome design and the ability to build DNA at scale all the way up to genome size.
Adrian, you're based out of San Francisco, and Cerebral Valley, so to speak, is not too far away. And we're seeing what big tech across the ecosystem is doing when it comes to AI. You speak of artificial biological intelligence, but if you just look at what's happening in the AI world to draw some lessons out of it, a few years ago, in AI years especially, we saw it was more of a hope-based approach when we spoke of AI. Now the narrative has shifted, especially over the past couple of weeks, where it's become a fear-based approach. A lot of top executives from these AI companies have left, really citing that safety has been sidelined for speed at a lot of these companies. In India, we have the AI Summit happening very soon, where a core conversation will be on safety and regulations. How do you view all of these developments? Is there a cause for concern the way these things are panning out in the AI storyline?
Yeah, I think the problem is, Ayush, is that people struggle to really comprehend the extent to which these technologies are going to change life as we know it. And it's hard for people to get their heads around it because the rate of change we're seeing now really is exponential. I think for most of humans' technological history, change has been slow and incremental.
Yeah.
And there's been enough time for governance to kind of manage that change in real time. I think the problem with the kind of changes we're seeing with AI and also in my own field with generative biology is that the change is now so rapid and the consequences of that change so profound that folks really struggle to keep up with it. And that's actually, honestly, one of the key reasons why I wrote my book. I mean, one of my colleagues, Brian He at Stanford, is one of the co-founders of my company, Generative, around 6 months ago, published the first ever entirely synthetic species. And it was a simple virus, actually, which isn't technically alive. It's a biological entity. But I would have thought that, if you demonstrate that you could make an artificial species, that would appear on the front page of the New York Times, but it didn't, right? And I kind of realized that people haven't fully grasped, the consequences of these technologies and just how disruptive they will potentially be to our way of life, in a good way, of course, but also there will be profound disruptions to how society operates. And we haven't really had enough time to think that through. There isn't really adequate governance in place to manage that because people are still getting their heads around the basic concept. So I totally agree with you. Having said that, Ayush, I'm not a great believer in moratoriums and trying to stop progress. I think progress itself and the imagination that we have as humans is an intrinsic part of our nature, and we've always relied on new technology to propel us to the next level. And I don't think technology itself is the problem. It's really how we manage that technology and how we use it for the greater good, ensure it's used safely, and ensure that everybody benefits and that it's used equitably and in a way that benefits society, but also humankind, and that preserves the nature of human nature as we know it. So technology itself is morally neutral, but when it progresses at the rate that it currently is, we just have to work extra hard to get our heads around it and make sure the appropriate guardrails are in place.
And speaking of appropriate guardrails, Adrian, this is completely numbing. This is next level in terms of authoring new species is what we're talking about over here. So does it worry you if we're drawing any sort of learnings or inspiration from what's happened with big corporations and big tech with this AI revolution, that the ethics argument or ethics as a whole are being sidelined even when we speak of something as critical as authoring a new species?
I think yes. I think you're absolutely right that one sees historically that commercial priorities are often overriding ethical issues, and people's priorities can be coloured when financial issues are involved. But I would like to think that we can align internationally on some broad guidelines to create a kind of worldwide governance system. But having said that, we also know that getting a kind of global consensus on anything these days is near impossible. And this technology, of course, is even more consequential than any technology that's preceded it, because if you can change the nature of genomes, eventually, and I'm not saying this is going to happen tomorrow or anytime soon, but we're on the pathway, we're heading in that way. Eventually, it will be possible to, in principle, to alter human genomes. And we will understand the basis of some of the what I would call the non-negotiables of human nature, which include things like a sense of moral judgment, a sense of what is right and what is wrong, free will, for example. And one can imagine in a world which is becoming increasingly authoritarian that such things may at some point in history be at risk. You can only lose free will once, for example, right? Having said that, there are so many positive aspects of a technology like this that one cannot simply ignore it, right? So one has to ensure that one maintains and generates appropriate ethical structures within which it can operate and develop as a science.
I'd love to get your thoughts on this. In the tech world, everyone's talking about AGI, and it's being seen as a supervillain, artificial general intelligence. NVIDIA's Jensen Huang has already gone ahead and coined the term artificial superintelligence. It's when these systems become even smarter than humans, and that day possibly is not far away. I'd love to get your thoughts, Adrian, on when we talk about artificial biological intelligence in this book on the future of species. Could it possibly be the antidote or the panacea when we're talking about the perils of AI taking over or AGI? Could ABI, if I could call it that, probably be the solution and maybe the antidote?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Ayush. And I have to say, you've asked some great questions today, so I really do appreciate that. You're right that you could argue that, hey, in a world where we're suddenly confronted with a synthetic intelligence which hugely surpasses our own, is the solution to kind of upgrade ourselves, right? And kind of give our brains and minds the competence to compete with AI. And that's a very, very interesting question. I'm not sure I have the answer to that. I'm not sure I even have the right as an individual to have an answer to that. I guess I could have an opinion on it.
Absolutely.
And I would say that I wouldn't necessarily rule it out, right? And so just to quickly go back to what I mean by the concept of ABI or artificial biological intelligence. So AGI is a kind of abstract ability to have a kind of a level of intelligence that is as good as humans or greater than humans in the case of artificial superintelligence. And actually, honestly, I think we're kind of pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, we're already there. I mean, my partner, Margarita, who fortunately isn't listening, but if she were, she'd agree. She gets upset with me because I spend more time these days talking to ChatGPT than I do with her. But hey, who else can talk to me at my level about philosophy and literature and art and biology and, in the way that ChatGPT can. And it's quite incredible. I mean, it's already got a creative capacity, in my view. And you can only imagine that in another 10 years, what that might look like, right? So artificial biological intelligence, though, is my way of saying that when AI moves into biology, it's qualitatively different, because now we're talking about using AI to kind of reverse engineer biology and reverse engineer the grammar of biology and obtain the ability to make life as we see fit, right? And once we have that power, we literally could reimagine ourselves, and it's quite possible that we could give ourselves a level of cognitive competence that can match AI, and then maybe at least we can bring morality back into the game, right? Because the difference between biological cognitive intelligence and AI is that we have emotions, we can sense the passage of time, we're kind of referential to the past, present, and future. So maybe that is the answer, because otherwise we'll become irrelevant, and we'll be lucky if AI keeps us as kind of curiosities in zoos, or we may just become totally irrelevant to AI, and actually, why would they want to keep us? So I think you're absolutely right, Ayush, to say, maybe there is some kind of new evolutionary battle, and maybe the ability to write DNA and design DNA is a kind of antidote to AI that came at the right moment, much like, I don't know about in India, but in England, we have these awful plants called stinging nettles, which when they sting you, leave you with a big, kind of red mark. And whenever you find a stinging nettle in England, almost certainly nearby you can find these big green plants with big leaves called dock leaves. And if you press a dock leaf onto the sting, it kind of alleviates it. So maybe this new ability to design biology and generate it is the antidote, the dock leaf, if you like, to the stinging nettle of AI that will enable humans to maintain their relevance. Now, let me be clear about this, Ayush. I'm not advocating that, right?
Yeah.
But you asked the question, and I'm saying I wouldn't rule it out. I'm not ruling it in either. But this is we need to sit down and over a dinner and debate this in a philosophical manner. But the whole world needs to have this debate, and my book will enable them to have the background knowledge to participate in that debate, and that's the point.
No, absolutely, and I'm so glad, and it's very reassuring to know that the author of such a top book and someone with a treasure trove of experience has some answers or the right questions, and I think it's all about the right questions in a world of prompt engineering. But the reason I asked you that, Adrian, was, and I didn't ask our common best friend ChatGPT, is because when we talk of AI now around the world, it conjures images of humanoid robots. And whenever you speak to experts, especially in this field, they say emotional intelligence, empathy, these are virtues that will decide the fate of human existence. And maybe that's how we'll always be one step ahead of AI systems. But then you also speak to certain researchers in the field of AI, and a lot of them have concerns, and they've been sidelined for voicing these concerns, that a lot of these platforms and systems are sort of behaving sentient. And then it really comes down to the fact that do we hold on to these values and virtues of empathy and expect these systems not to be able to mimic them? Or then do we also talk about a second genesis where maybe the next race of humans would probably be one step ahead? And that was the only philosophical point I had.
Right. Let me give you another angle on that same line of discussion, which is quite concerning, actually, right? But let me put this to you, Ayush, right? Imagine, it is the case, right, that we're allowing AI to design genomes for us simply because we can't do it ourselves, right? It's just too complex for us, right? But imagine if AI does become sentient, right? And AI develops its own agenda, which may not be favorable to humans, and starts to sneak in by stealth elements to the biology of these species that it designs in the virtual world, which could be detrimental to us, right? And we might never know because we simply don't have the ability to discern those things, right? So it's super important that we ensure, and on an ongoing basis, that AI is on our side, particularly when AI is given the responsibility for designing life, new species, and eventually, perhaps, potentially, even designing humans at the level of whole genomes, or even rewriting small regions of human genomes to help get rid of complex diseases, which may be the only way, actually, we'll be able to address highly complex diseases where many, many genes are involved. So we need to keep an eye on AI and ensure it remains on board, with us and our agendas.
Well, it's fascinating you say that, Adrian, because just last week on our shows and across the NDTV network, we were talking about this new platform called Moltbook, which is basically AI agents talking to each other and talking in private rooms where humans can just watch, not even comment or engage, just watch, right? So, and they were talking about having a separate room altogether, an encrypted room where humans don't need to be a part of it. So you're right in terms of once the genie's out of the bottle, I think guardrails should have been a question probably of the past and something that we could have envisioned a little earlier. But when it comes to your field of expertise, which is the future of species, let's paint a larger question and a larger image right here. Do you think for the next 10 to 20 years, once these AI systems have developed, do you see the future of the world, of humans, of humanity being awry, or is there a ray of hope given all your research and everything you've documented in this fantastic book?
Yeah, Ayush, look, I'm a great optimist, right? And I wouldn't be working on this if I thought it would be detrimental to humankind, right? I'm really confident that as a species, with all of our problems, our irrationality, our paradoxical nature, our general craziness, let's face it, we do crazy things as humans, but at the end of the day, all of that is underpinned by, I hope, in most people, a kind of deeper sense of morality and love for our fellow people and respect for nature and for each other. And I'm pretty convinced that we can use this technology constructively in a way that will help us bring benefits to all of humankind, to the people in the world who don't have enough food to eat on a daily basis, to the people in the world who don't have access to basic things like electricity and clean water and basic infrastructure like shelter. And I think biology will help us to democratize those basic resources and make them available to everybody, and also help us to build a world which is less destructive to nature and that values nature and that preserves ecosystems and the heritage that has been passed down to us by evolution over the last 4 billion years. That's a precious heritage. And it's really a key message of my book, actually, that we must value historical life and live alongside it. And anything we do synthetically must be done with great care and firewalled from nature so that we don't risk in any way damaging it. And hopefully, if we can use biology responsibly as a programmable language, as a predictive engineering material, we'll slowly be able to move away from destructive fossil fuels and destructive chemical processes that degrade the earth and fill the oceans with microplastics and so on, and just move to a much more sustainable mode of existence and a state of existence where everyone in the world is able to live longer, more healthily, and free themselves of disease and have everything they need to live a comfortable life. And that's my vision. It's a positive vision. And I do believe we can deliver that if we work together to make it happen.
Adrian, your optimism is contagious, because here in India, we're all believers in a tenet, which I must share with you, called an emotion or a way of life called jugaad. Now we've had Harvard social scientists and Ivy League social scientists try to coin this term. The closest they came to was frugal innovation, but it's the belief that in times of adversity or when there's scarcity, in India somehow we manage to perform with limited resources and we find a solution. And whenever I've been tuned into a lot of the AI chatter and all the AI slop and also meeting some of the biggest experts from around the world, the optimist in me feels the same way. And I always had questions, but I'm so glad that we chatted today, because you've given me so many answers and so many perspectives. And for all of us tuned in, well, this is the book which gives you all those answers and builds on those themes. Just reading this for a couple of days prepped me for this interview, and I could ask a bunch of questions that Adrian could probably also incorporate in the sequel to this one, which I also wanted to ask you, Adrian, are we going to get a part 2 very soon?
Actually, I've just completed my kind of idea for the part 2, and I'll be discussing that with my agent and publisher probably in the next week. So the answer is yes, you can look forward to that.
Absolutely, Adrian. What an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us here on NDTV and Tech 360. This has been an insightful, fascinating conversation, and congratulations on the launch of a book which genuinely talks about the next great frontier.
Thank you so much, Ayush. Such a great pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you.